Welcome to the Productivity Podcast. Today I'm joined by a good friend of mine and former boss of mine and colleague of mine, John Dobson. Hi, John.
Hi.
That was some introduction. I'm not sure I've used that one before.
Every time.
Every time.
You just like to get it in.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I assume the order was right, but yeah, anyway, that's life. So we worked together in a previous life. So do you want to tell everybody, give us a quick career bio of kind of what you've done, where we met, and then we'll get into the story today, looking at leadership structures of the future.
Yeah, okay. Well, I started in DIY retail. That's kind of where I met Simon. I've probably done most positions in a retail store as well. I then moved into retail management and then project management, etc., and then did about 23 years in that. I then left and took a career break of about 3.5 years to complete the degree I never did when I was 18. And at the age of 50, I got my degree in psychology. And then after that, I joined and worked for Simon at Rethink, and that's what we do now. We do management. Well, I do the management structure bit on the back of the work studies that Rethink do, and try and regenerate new management structures for lots of retailers.
How the tables have turned. I've got it on recording now that you work for me.
You've got it on recording loads of times.
I've got it on recording.
As long as you don't keep playing it back to me, I don't mind.
It will be on loop. So I know, it's a tricky time in the world. We've come out of 2 years of lockdown, which has been a real challenge for everybody. Certainly those service industries like retail and hospitality were significantly hit. We're in the midst of, unfortunately, some kind of war in Ukraine and Russia. We've got rising prices of energy like we've never seen before, food, all sorts of things happening that are just affecting us. And all the retailers that we work with are turning their attention to cost base again. And rightly so. You could argue they should be doing that all the time as an ongoing thing. But one of the things that they always go back to is, where are my biggest costs if we think about retail and hospitality? Typically that's in leadership structures, so store managers, hotel managers, restaurant managers, and then all the supervisory, team leader, assistant, deputy roles that sit under there. So I know we want to talk about leadership structures of the future and where we think it may be heading, but it's probably worth just setting the scene of you giving us a feel for the structures that you see are in place today, some of maybe housekeeping that people don't get to do because they always deal with it in the here and now. So what kind of trends and things have you seen as structures that are in play with some of the organisations we've been working with?
Well, I think certainly when we were working in DIY retail, we heard this phrase quite a lot, let's do it once and let's do it right. And then all these complexities of transition, the change costs and everything else comes to light, and they start backpedaling and say, hold on a minute, we maybe don't want to do that, let's just do this. And you get a lower staged response to what really should have been a bigger project. And then over the last decade, we've seen a real limited appetite for radical change. It's the same thing, really. And we know there's loads of reasons for this. We've both seen it. It could be the difficulty exiting legacy contracts, the potential for redundancies and the associated costs with that, loss of experience, and just a host of general difficulties in that transition that I wouldn't say put people off, but become a huge project rather than just a stepping stone to the next stage, if you like. So we see a lot of structures that they start off with all these good intentions, and then really what they do is they just deal with what the immediate problem is. Whether it's a change to the opening hours and reduced opening hours, therefore they need less management, or the change to policies, etc., etc. They just kind of deal with whatever that is, and it's merged in. And one of the reasons that that those management structures ended up like that as well is because of the operational process requirements. So structures have always been driven in the main, especially in retail, as I say again, by operational process needs. I'm not saying that any thought, wasn't given to colleagues' career progression or and basic needs or anything. That's kind of the process. Let's deal with what we need operationally. Let's deal with what we need for our admin or our process or our structure of the tills, etc., etc., and then we'll work the rest of it around it. But as we've seen, and we've seen it a lot, and it's still going on, although it's a lot better. Managers working longer hours, in lots of offset because it's increased by the amount of time they're there, and it kind of results in individuals' productivity dropping and work-life balance, which is kind of a key thing for people these days, being not as good as it should be.
And is that, do you think, because people underestimate the scale of these projects and the time to change and the cost impacts, or is it just an eagerness to kind of tick the box, get it done, move on to the next thing, and bank some cost or redistribute some hours?
Yeah, I think it sometimes it starts off as a great intention to get you into a fit for the future structure that's flexible, etc., etc. But yeah, a cost is a massive difference, and as you've just mentioned earlier on, people are conscious of cost now, so that's going to affect these kind of big changes, taking out of legacy contracts and changing generally the whole way you manage your structures and those people in it. It's difficult. You've got to have some people need a whole L&D program. Some people end up with quite a bit of runners. Some retailers have got a lot of long service people, and they're really scared to lose them. I mean, and the potential is, if you're working on a minimum wage and you've got 20 hours and you're coming up, 5 years you're going to retire, and you've got an opportunity for redundancy, lots of people take it.
And you mentioned the word future there, because I know one of the questions that always crops up in any of these conversations is, so how do I future proof? I think, is there some clues in that? Is there some really clear things that you need to do to future proof, or is it just one of those things that, we wouldn't have predicted what's happened in the last 2 years and certainly this year? So all you can do is act with the information and knowledge you've got at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I get asked quite a bit. How do you future-proof your structure? If we do this big change, how can we ensure that it's going to be suitable for the next 5, 10, whatever years? And it's always a really difficult question. I mean, it obviously depends on what they've got and what their starting point is. But it's a difficult question to answer easily, and it's also a difficult position to get yourself into, because actually you don't really know what's going to happen in 5, 10 years, as we've seen over the last 4 or 5. But I think there's quite a phrase or a few things that you can just, if you think about, it's the best position you could possibly be in for whatever's coming around the corner. And that's really, you want a flexible workforce. And I know everybody says that, and people think that means lots of part-timers. It doesn't. It means no fixed hour contracts. It means flexible contracts. And every time I say that, people think, oh, basically, why would colleagues want to work different hours every week? That's not what flexible is. Flexible is having maybe a 5 and 7 contract for full-timers with your 4 weeks, but with the ability to move it to whatever changes with the correct amount of time given to let them know, etc., etc. You want to increase your spans of control, reduce offset, reduce the amount of management time spent doing simple tasks. And let's face it, we see that at what, 60, 70% sometimes, is it?
Yep. Yeah, and more.
Yeah, and more, and 80 and 90. And really, you've got to have some offset. I mean, because you want them, coaching at the shelf edge. You want them on the floor, working as a team. It's motivatory and all that kind of thing. But maybe 30%. If you're looking at convenience stores, it's obviously going to be higher, 40 and 50. But it shouldn't be much more than 50. And then if you're looking at bigger units, etc., then 30, 20 even. But as you say, we see up to 90.
I always think in those situations where you've got a big leadership structure, so store manager, assistant deputy, and then a number of team leaders underneath, if that working as a colleague time is more than 50%, if I've got 4 team leaders, in effect 2 of those are colleagues when you start to do the maths.
Yes, absolutely. And again, and because there's a lot of that supervisory level still around, people seem to bulk up the supervisory level because It's a less expensive thing than having deputy and assistant managers, yet you get what you think is core management cover. Yet, as you say, they just paid a slightly bit more, and they do colleague activity.
And we talked a lot around kind of the percentages of management offset, all those things, and flexibility. And again, I think back to my time in store, the most flexible colleagues were probably full time or near full time because that was their only job, that was their focus, so they were in work or out. In a world of lots of part timers or people with multiple jobs because they can't get full time, I kind of wonder, I know there's a reason why some people are part time, childcare commitments, elderly parent commitments, other outside of work commitments, so that probably limits their flexibility. And in a world where we've got organisations now paying higher than national living wage, if I've got two jobs, where does my allegiance lie? Probably with the one where I can earn more money or gives me more hours, which means I'm less flexible for the other one. Yeah. So flexibility for me is all about, as you said, that definition of what is it, how does it look? We've seen organisations drive to really low contract hours, all those kind of things, and then lots swinging back into full-time because the market's demanding security, a good rate of pay, and then I'll give you my flexibility rather than tell me I've got 12 hours a week. Well, actually, employer B is going to give me 24 and 6 hours overtime, so I'm probably going to struggle to do more than 12 for you. The dynamics massively changed, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's something that if 10 years ago we were looking at moving into more part-time working hours, therefore there's more flexibility, and as you say, and recently we've seen quite a number of retailers who've got that very thing, especially in convenience and in smaller unit retail. We see a lot of multiple people with multiple jobs, and as you say, one of the key things is where's their loyalty, where's their most likelihood they're going to do the extra hours, and also some of them physically can't. Some of them are doing 2 and 3 jobs. So what you want is a balance between full time and part time. So you need some part timers, obviously, and sometimes that's where you start to get your new people of the future from as well. And then they can move into full time. Some of the time we're using college people, etc., etc. But if they're there's two things. If they're part time, they've got 2 other jobs. The reason for that is they really want to be full time. If they're working 30 odd hours a week across the board, they really want to be full time, and they need a living wage, and so they may be the breadwinner for their family unit or whatever, or their household. So to support those kind of people, you're going to have to increase the number of hours they get. They become more, loyal to you, if you like. You give them opportunity for a better career development pathway, and therefore you get the managers of the future, and you're making them yourself. Whereas a lot of part-timers, reduced numbers of opportunity for people to move from part-time to supervisory level to deputy manager, whatever it is, or onwards. And those people just do those part-time jobs. And then when the availability somewhere else comes up for a longer hours or a full-time job, they leave and go and do that. So all that training development stuff you've done with them goes out the window. So it's understanding that balance between full and part-time hours. And I think it's shifting because of the way the market is at the moment. I think it's shifting. So you get a number of full-timers, a core base of full-timers, and working 37 to 40 hours a week. And then something that somebody told me the other day they were called half-timers. I thought you might like that because it's kind of a football term.
Yeah.
You get half-timers, working 20 hours a week. And then you get your balance of part-timers who do maybe some evenings and whatever.
So overtime becomes extra timers, right?
Yeah.
I like it. I can work in that language.
Yeah.
I can work in that language. So for those service-based industries, what do we think they should be looking at in terms of the future from structure points of view? I think one of the key points from the conversation so far is dealing with cleaning up the historical things. I think is probably one of the first points. So having a level base, a consistent platform, historical contracts, difficult to do, granted, but that must be a good start point.
Yeah, yes, I think so. I mean, there's a host of things that people can do now to move forward. They clean up the historical stuff, something you can do. I mean, people, when I say a radical change, you don't necessarily need to do a big bang. Those type of things can take time. They can also run alongside your structure changes. You don't need to do them at a certain point to be ready for the structure. You can manage alongside, so you can have an evolved structure as long as it doesn't take 20 years and only takes the period of time of your project, which could be 6 to 9 months. But then you actually deal with all the problems alongside, managing your structure change. So there's a couple of things for me. Stop micromanaging. We do it because of the amount of people, especially, and the amount of supervisors that we see at the moment. There's a lot of micromanagement. So that's the span of control. We've seen spans recently of 1-to-1. I mean, one supervisor for one member of staff or one colleague. So you start allow people to make the decisions within the parameters of their job responsibilities. So, I mean, increasing spans has some significant benefits. I mean, spans really should generally decrease with complexity. I can't say that word. Say that word.
Complexity.
Yeah. And increase with independent working, where similar tasks are being completed. So in retail, you would assume that we're in that kind of bracket. So similar tasks are being completed on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So increasing spans, and, when I say increasing them, I'm not asking for 20 and 30, although you can have that in bigger supermarket, etc. But even 5, we see so many people at 1 and 2.
And that complexity in those bigger supermarkets you mentioned is reducing as well, isn't it? Because bakers, fishmongers, deli counters, we've seen come out post-COVID because of cost. So from a complexity model, you're left with some specialist roles, maybe around some admin work-ish, but everything else is colleague work, stock or tills.
Yeah. And really, those are people that need to have some manager presence. But once they're trained in doing those jobs, whatever they are, then they need to have some kind of autonomy. It gives you increased team member responsibility. It increases their development rate, and a really good benefit is they feel valued, and they get higher levels of trust. So it's one of the first things you can look at, and it's dead easy. Stop micromanaging and increase your spans. Well, I suppose the other thing you could do, identify your process improvements. Yeah, and one thing, stop checking the checker. I mean, I know it's a bit of a bugbear of yours as well, but if you see it where, a colleague checks something, could be a warehouse entry or something, supervisor or admin manager checks it, bang, yeah, that's right. And then the store manager checks it at the end of the day. You're checking the checker, and it is unnecessary. And without, I think one instance where we found it to be an absolute necessity to check the checker. I mean, maybe the also thing they could do is they could have a rethink work study, couldn't they? And a structure evaluation as a great big baseline to start. Because I think people really underestimate the need to understand what your workload is for not just for management only tasks, but throughout your sales floor. Therefore, to understand what kind of structure you need in place to ensure you meet those back to operational requirements again.
Yeah, and I think one of the benchmarking is really powerful in that, because clearly that's data we built up over a number of years. So where do you sit in the benchmark structure of how much time managers, assistants, deputies spend with colleagues, customers, doing colleague activity? Admin's a big push at the moment. We're seeing so lots of people re-looking at management admin. Is it created from the centre? Is it created from the regional team? Have you got a store manager or an assistant store manager who's collating stats for the region to present back that actually somebody can probably get more accurately and quicker in the centre? There's all those practices still going on there. And as you say, checking. So there's a big question mark of why are you checking? And then, if 3 people are checking the checker, it's becoming an expensive game based on the rising cost base.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, they may find a mistake once in a while, but that cost of that mistake is far outweighed by the cost of checking it every day across your whole estate.
Absolutely. So what other bits are on your list for what people should be thinking about?
There's something that, again, you hear and it comes up and people ask about or they think about, and it's something that's been flirted with over the last few years of job sharing. and it's one of those things that it's got to be the right place at the right time, if you like. It works well on low levels of responsibility. When you're looking at other roles, and it's always dependent on the relationship. And then when everything's going well, it's great. But when it's not, that really challenges that relationship. So it's how those 2 or 3 people sharing that job are managed, and whether or not that relationship's strong enough to withstand things when they go wrong. So it's a difficult one. And I think it can be used on request. If people say, I can't do it, I can only do half 20 hours a week, and you want to give them the opportunity to stay with you because they're experienced, then it's something that you could introduce on that kind of basis. But as a big thing to drop in, it's difficult to implement.
Yeah.
Other thing is cluster management. Most people got hub management, don't they, these days? And, does it work? Well, yeah, we've seen some really great examples of it, and also some really poor examples. The benefits kind of for hub management, where we're talking about increasing the span of control to colleague supervisor level, this can help reduce regional management control, or by increasing the regional management areas. It has a positive effect on perceived career development. One of the things you see a lot of as well is store managers with lots of experience without opportunity to progress, and it's almost they've come to that position. They're looking for something more. They've got to a store manager. They're expert at that role. They need something else, and there's no vacancies really for regional manager. Or that step is just a too large a thing for A, for companies to take a risk at, and B, for that colleague to actually be able to achieve.
And you've kind of seen that personally, haven't you, in a previous life of being wanting to take that next step, but actually then internal people trying, but then external people coming in and almost having a better chance just because they've already done that role, or they're just external. So it can be a real demotivator and blocker as well, can't it? And then you start to lose good experienced people.
Yeah, it's exactly the route I went down. And so I was internally promoted eventually from a store manager level to a regional manager level, but I had to jump through an inordinate amount of hoops in that process. And, we had assessment centres where I'd go and I'd be faced with, 4 other people in this assessment centre who were all regional managers somewhere else. So they brought a skill level I really didn't have at that time. And then I was made a project manager to help me. I did a huge amount of projects. One of them was probably one of the best projects I've ever done, which was the integration of the structure for Do It All and Great Mills. So that kind of gave me the grounding that started me doing this. So I've got no complaints.
No.
But it's obviously a lot more difficult. So we've seen it and we understand that. So hub managers can give you that little jump up where you're managing 2 or 3 units. And in fact, if you remember, I did that in Cumbria. Yep. I got 3 stores to do. So it was like hub management then. And it worked really well. It gave me a real insight into what the role was going to be. It gave me that understanding of being, on the road on your own, not responsible for one unit, but for multiple units. I mean, it increases the skill base of the supervisors, team leader levels and management levels in the store as well. And it supports like a consistent delivery of the brand, I think. There's some risks, though, always. And these are the things that you can be mitigated. It's about how you set it up, and it's about how you develop the people for those roles. If you're not careful, you can increase the number of management heads because somebody steps up to be the manager of the store. So now you've got a manager in place of the manager that's left, and you've also got a hub manager. Hub managers kind of a favourite store. They might have a cash cow that they're kind of a bit precious about. They spend most of the time in there. You create 2-tier standards. Other managers in the store can feel an added responsibility. They don't get any reward for it. So that's obviously a negative, and it's a reduction in productivity sometimes. And that hub manager could become a firefighter rather than be a leadership role. I know that sounds like quite a few there, but they're easily mitigated by the method and the approach that you take to your L&D process in moving those people from store manager to hub manager. And you don't have to cluster every store, a group of every store. You don't have to have all your stores clustered. It can be just in different areas. It can be like we've got 3 stores in Bristol of similar size. You might have one big unit and 2 smaller units close by, and in which case, ideal clustering. But if you're, got 10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles, whatever, long distances between each one, then it's not going to be, it's pointless, really. You don't need to do that. So you can have a mix, and that mix actually supports all this development stuff as well.
Final question then, and it's one that crops up kind of quite a lot. Job descriptions versus role profiles. So we see lots of people spend amazing amounts of time on job descriptions that, for me, become an interview reference point, and maybe a reference point when you're writing your performance review or doing a performance review, because you'll have a list of criteria. We've seen some great examples of role profiles as well, which are more living and breathing documents of this is the job, this is what you're expected to do, this is how you do it. Have people got those balances right, or do you still see lots of people just doing great job descriptions or very detailed job descriptions that then just sit in the intranet or in a filing cabinet until the next interview appraisal?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, if I'm being blunt, a job description is something you see when you're starting a business, and then you never look at it again.
Yeah.
We see that all the time. When actually, as you mentioned, a living, breathing document, it not only should tell you the tasks that you are responsible for, the areas that you're accountable for, and obviously your line management structure behind it. It needs to be quite dynamic, so it needs to explain and show you the behaviours that you need to achieve success in those areas. I've seen some really good quality role profiles that also give people the amount of time you would normally spend 20% of your time on this, etc., etc. And it's a blueprint for a guide to how you do your role. And and as you move through your role, it's something that you can, and it also should be linked to the ethos of the company in terms of their normal L&D package that runs on from it, any other training and development stuff, the career progression stuff, and and as you say, it's part of that whole pack. So the theme's the same. It should even run through whatever their customer service proposition is, everything. So yeah, we've seen some great ones, but still see these 5-page do this, do that, do this, stuck in a cupboard. I don't even look at it now. I know what my job is, and that's not benefiting anybody. And there is something I quickly I need to mention that is one of my real bugbears. It's just moving slightly off the path a second. Is something that people haven't really ran with. I mean, I've seen it in a number of companies, and I feel it's a no-brainer. And I struggle when people think, no, we won't bother doing that. And that's key holders. We've had conversations with people about key holders, and they get to a point of saying, "No, I like the idea, but I'm not really sure we can implement that." And it's a simple thing. It's not new by any means, and it's really underused. And I kind of never understood the reticence not to jump all over this. It can be a development step, it massively reduces your offset. It gives a level of responsibility for colleagues for short periods and the pay to go with it, and allows that development path of even part-timers with experience and full-timers to have an opportunity what it's like to be a supervisor. So they don't have to make that jump. It's another little step. Key holders only need to be paid for the time they're key holders. They can support opening and closing, and that's ideal. They don't want to be doing too many hours a week because it's not a supervisory role as such, apart from the time they're doing that. It reduces offset across the whole of the estate because you need less supervisory levels open and closing. And to be fair, we see that level packed with people sometimes just to cover off those operational requirements, and it's unnecessary. And it's something I would urge people to look at in terms of all the other things, all the other great things that we've talked about that can help you reduce your management offset and overlap time, etc. This is one thing that will do it overnight, if you like.
And we've seen examples, as you know, of people that were forced into it during the pandemic. So clearly lots of sickness. If you were a essential retailer, you could stay open. So there was a big rethink, change of mindset in terms of, well, how do we keep our stores open with less people because of sickness? people shielding, all that kind of stuff. So they did do that. They let colleagues become key holders for a period of time. I think it's safe to say that some have stuck with it, and it's also safe to say that some unfortunately reverted back. And actually, in that period, stores kept trading in difficult environments. Trade was a lot higher than before because there was only a certain amount of place you could go and shop. So it shows it can be done, and it shows if you stick with it, you can get the results.
Yeah.
It's just a shame that some people pull back from it.
Yeah. It is, and and realizing those benefits, and certainly the people we've seen that have said, right, okay, yeah, we'll take that on board and we'll do it. I've seen those benefits, and they're not long term benefits. They're almost immediate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that note of golden nugget advice, we'll stop there. John, it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up.
Thank you.
If people want to get in touch, then LinkedIn's a good place. Get in touch through the Rethink website as well. So if anybody wants any organizational design information, further discussion, then those are the places to find John. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much. Bye.